Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Joe Davidge. I'm the Executive Director here at the Georgia Center for the Book. And on behalf of the Georgia Center for the Book, the Decatur Arts Alliance, DeKalb County Public Library, and the DeKalb Library Foundation, welcome to our third and final in our series of artist talks for The Book is Art Transformation. A few things before we begin our formal presentation this evening. We have enabled the closed captioning for tonight's event. So if you require that, find the CC button at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. And when you click on that CC button, you can change the font size to make it as legible and as large as you need. We'd also like to remind you, if you'd like to ask any of our artists this evening questions after their formal presentations, to do so by using the Q&A feature. You'll find the Q&A feature at the top or the bottom of your screen. And when you click on it, you can type your question in there and we'll make sure to answer it in turn. You can also feel free to use the chat feature and we'll get questions from there as they come up. We'd also like to remind you that many of the works in the Book as Art Transformation exhibition are for sale, and a portion of those sales benefit the Decatur Arts Alliance. You can find that price list and the entire catalog at thebookasart.com. I would also like to remind you that we have gallery hours, not only Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, but we are doing a special session of gallery hours on Monday, October 31st. A true artistic treat for all of us. We'll be passing out gloves, that way you can examine the books a little more closely than we've permitted you to for the entire exhibition. You can sign up for those gallery hours at georgiacenterforthebook.org, and we will have a link over in the chat so you can get directly there. Right now, I'd also like to remind you that our previous artist talks are on our YouTube channel. You can find all of our videos from this year, last year, as well as our author series videos there to review at your leisure. Right now, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our artists this evening in alphabetical order, and then we'll begin our presentations. Lee Bassuet is an artist, designer, and educator based in Rhode Island. Originally from Brooklyn, New York, but raised in Seoul, South Korea, and both West and East Coasts of America, she's lived between two cultures and seeks her roots by exploring work on the body, nature, and memory. She completed her master's in the fine art at Osaka University of Arts in Monbusho Scholarship and a bachelor's from New York University in graphic communications. In New York, she was an artist member and graphic designer at the Center for Book Arts for several years. She is currently teaching book arts and printmaking at AS 2020 in Providence and is chair of the education committee there. She's looking forward to teaching the art of the book at Brown University Visual Art Department in January 2023. She has participated in artist residencies at AS 2020 and Manhattan Graphic Center and exhibited in New York, Providence, Michigan, Florida, Seattle, Red Lodge, Kyoto, Osaka, and Shanghai. Her book arts are in the Columbia University Libraries, Mass Art Libraries, the Rhode Island School for Design Fleet Library Collection, Western Michigan's University Special Collections, as well as many private collections. David Johnson was born across the Big River in Fort Dodge, Iowa. He attended public school, walked beans, you're going to have to explain that one to us, baled hay, and worked as a busboy and a janitor. He graduated with a bachelor's in fine art and drawing from the University of Iowa, where he discovered prints with the Virginia Myers. He held jobs as a state liquor store clerk, built grain elevators on the Mississippi River, worked in the Kmart Pet and Garden Center, picked apples in Washington State, and fell off the Christmas tree truck. Needless to say, he had a very colorful work experience. He put together the Ferris wheel for the carnival and stacked boxes in the Sears catalog warehouse in Minneapolis. He studied printmaking again with Fred Hagstrom at Cleveland Institute of Art and graduated with a master's in the fine arts from Miami University, where he worked with Robert Wolfe. David taught at Miami University, Anderson College, and for 33 years at Ball State University, where he taught foundations, beginning drawing, figure drawing, introduction to printmaking, and relief printmaking. He has his own intaglio, relief prints, and books in approximately 400 exhibitions since 1983. His work is in the collections of the New York Public Library, the Boston Public Library, Yale, Oberlin College, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Indiana University, among others. Next is Mary V. Marsh. Mary V. Marsh is an Oakland artist making prints, artist books, and installations exploring the changing technologies of communication through a lens of personal experience and anxiety. Her love of books and work in libraries has provided a foundation for ideas and materials, and research about reading informs her work. She has had solo shows at the San Jose Museum of Art, the San Francisco Arts Commission at Grove Street, Berkeley Art Center, the San Francisco Public Library Skylight Gallery, and Mercury 20. She makes artist books and prints as quite contrary press, including collaborative works with her husband, Tony Belber. Quite Contrary Press shows at the Codex Book Fair, the Art of the Book exhibitions at Seeger Gray Gallery, and is in collections at the San Francisco MoMA Library, the Bancroft Library, the Harvard Fine Arts Library, Yale University Art Library, and many others. Public collections include the Berkeley Civic Center Art Collection and the City of Hayward. She received a master's in the fine arts from the San Francisco Art Institute in 1992, a fellowship award from McCullough Arts Institute in 2018, and a 2022 Small Plates Artist at San Francisco Center for the book. Dan Wood is an artist and printer living in Providence, Rhode Island. After briefly studying history at McGill University, he received a bachelor's in the fine arts from Rhode Island School of Design in 1994, continuing his education in printing and commercial print shops ever since. He established DWRI Letterpress in 2002, working collaboratively with other artists, designers, businesses, and institutions looking for fine letterpress printing. He is a senior critic at the Rhode Island School of Design and Art in the City Life Commissioner for the City of Providence, Rhode Island, and believes strongly in the community building power of art making. His work can be found in many public and private collections. So once again, I'd like to welcome all four of our artists for joining us this evening and thanking them immensely for taking this time out of their lives to spend with us and chat a little bit with you. And I'd first like to welcome Andre to give her presentation. Andre?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me at this artist talk. I'm really excited to share my work with you all and discuss the book as art. I'm speaking to you from actually the AS220 community studios here in the laser cutter room. This is a nonprofit community art center that maintains exhibition spaces as well as print shops that has letterpress, etching presses, silk screen capabilities, as well as a fab lab with a laser cutter, 3D printers, wood shop downstairs, a community dark room, you name it. It's got even a bar and a restaurant, dance studios as well. So a little background on me. I'm a Korean American artist, born in Brooklyn, as Joe explained. I've lived in Korea from the age of 3 to 9. So I kind of lived between the two cultures, never really feeling like I belonged in either one. I kept on moving back and forth from America to South Korea. So I felt displaced in both cultures and not felt grounded anywhere. So I think that has a lot to do with my work. I'm kind of searching for my own roots, and I combine a lot of the human body and nature, merging the qualities of both. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So the book that I have at the Decatur Library right now is called My Pricklies, and it is a flag book that's been laser cut here right at AS220. The flag book is a book structure originally invented by Heidi Kyle, and it's these are just a lot of, I call them cactos because they're like toes, cactuses, cacti, and they're glued on an accordion spine that fans out when you open it. And the size is 9 by 12, and when you open it, it becomes sort of like a sculpture in a way. It was first displayed at the Kalamazoo Book Art Center earlier this year at their annual illustrated accordion exhibition. And I love the accordion because of its versatility, and it's great to play around with. There's so many different forms of accordions. But I'll circle back to this book. I wanted to discuss the evolution of my work with these. These are sort of like my early works that I've done while I was a resident at the Manhattan Graphic Center. I started out doing etchings there, and I guess this is kind of like the first rendition of how I started kind of combining kind of plant and body imagery. And then I started incorporating embroidery back then too. And then the third work on the right is actually kind of like a big departure from color and aesthetics, because this was an abrupt change in my life when I moved to Montana in 2015. I was very isolated and quite like the landscape changed for me while I lived in Montana, because there's basically snow 9 months out of the year. So all I was faced with was just whiteness, like horizon. I mean, it was a great big sky for sure, but a lot of whiteness. And I missed the greenery, the gardens, the flowers, the four seasons. And I was also in isolation. So I basically started doing a lot of colorful watercolors and embroidery, and kind of made it into a series of, this is called The Flower Bed, and this was made in 2016. And then I always envisioned this flower bed as kind of like a book in the final product in the end. So I actually made that come to fruition back in Rhode Island. We spent 2 years in Montana, and then we moved to Rhode Island as another big move. And by that time, I had a solo show at one of the AS220 galleries. They have a motto of unjuried, uncensored. And so I also submitted this book at the Kalamazoo Book Art Center and in one of their illustrated accordion exhibitions. And it was actually, this book was the one that was acquired by Western Michigan's University Special Collections. And so, oh, I forgot I was going to read the beginning of the poem. Was called, I look for you, my lips are sealed, longing for completeness. And then it ends, this is the last page of the book, ends with the cactos, saying cactos, finding ground, dense and succulent. So I'm just reading that now, just sort of like a prelude to what I'll read later at the end of my talk, because I wrote another poem for another edition. So kind of like the central themes in these works kind of involve love and longing and transience and the fleeting nature of our existence. And so the flowers are growing thick and vigorous, and so with longing and passion. And so they also go through these cycles of bloom and death and rebirth again. And so I guess I'm trying to like represent, my work represents that transience and delicate presence of that human form, kind of merging of the two. And so after that solo exhibition, the community at AS220 was so welcoming, and I became more involved, and I became an artist in residence in 2020. And so right before the pandemic hit, in February 2020, we actually had a drink and ink event where we invite the public and we educate them on all these processes to learn about silkscreen, cyanotype, laser cutting, relief, offset, and letterpress. And so I had to create all the artwork for it, where the public can come and drink and ink whatever you want to print and keep the art and take it home. So we made, so I silk screened these posters, so you kind of see the common motifs of my tongue flowers, and also tote bags. And we also made instant pop-up, instant books on the letterpress. Oh, and then we also did cyanotypes. And so, yeah, you see kind of like the recurring imagery of the eye, flowers, and cyanotypes. And then I was really excited about finding community here at AS220 that year. But then right after, in March, 2020 is when the pandemic hit and everything kind of closed down temporarily and then kind of sort of semi-permanently. So I was kind of stuck at home again, not able to, because I was very excited to be in Rhode Island, where I found, because in New York, I was at Center for Book Arts, where there was a community there with all these presses and everything. And then I was really excited to find this community in Rhode Island. And then all of a sudden, everything was shut down again. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And then I had just kind of started to explore all these cyanotypes. And cyanotypes is something that I could do at home. So that's what I explored during the last 2 years, and started doing cyanotypes on fabric and doing embroidery on that. And I think coming back to embroidery has always been kind of like my, how I dealt with my anxiety about the future and about current events and things. And the left piece is called Weeping, and it's sort of, it incorporates all the gray hairs that I actually got from the pandemic. Actually, I had such a significant number of gray hair appear that year in 2020. I think due to just having just recently gone through a divorce and the pandemic hitting and moving all at once. It's just, yeah, it was a significant turning point for me. And then this is actually a more recent work called Ears Bleeding from All the Crap. And it's more, this is actually, I'm just kind of plugging this because we have an art auction, online auction for the Korean American Artist Collective, and it's happening this weekend. So I wanted to plug that. And I also went during the pandemic, I also went back to my watercolors and sketching, and I like to incorporate the activities with my own children. I have 2 children, 2 daughters. And so it's something I can do at home. Like I don't need the printing press. I can just sketch and watercolor and take it home. And I started also doing the embroidery again. We did this was a group exhibition at the Aborn Gallery in Providence. And so I wanted to explore the flag book. This was my first time exploring the flag book structure. And in a gallery sitting, so I included this photo so for scale. And I realized in a gallery setting, wow, this book is really small. Like I didn't like it. And so it was actually, I think the size was 6x8. And I thought, okay, for the next book, like, because in the end, like my big picture was I wanted to edition this book. And I was like, I wanted to go bigger. So I thought, how can I edition it? Because I can't, all these like embroidery, it's so involved and I couldn't edition this. So I decided to start laser cutting it. And this is when AS220 was back open. And so laser cutting it was better than actually the silhouette cutter, because I had a silhouette cutter at home, but it would just kind of like go through my blades after a couple sheets. And so I did a whole bunch of cactos and went big. And I love the effect it has in the sun, the shadows, and just the 3D aspect of it. And the cactus as a symbol for me, I was drawn to it because of the, during the pandemic, it just has this versatility. It has this ability to thrive in intense conditions, and it has a hard protective exterior, but it also has like this ability to contain water. And Native American cultures believe that the cactus represents warmth and protection and motherly love. So this accordion book transforms the cacti into marching feet. And I think that facing challenges can really transform you, and facing your fears and overcoming them and living through the most difficult times and actually surviving that makes you a stronger person. So I also wanted to edition it, and to make an edition, I actually wanted to write some poetry that I letterpress on the back of the spine of the accordion. So I'll read that. And I'm going to have this ready for the Boston Art Book Fair coming up in November. So this poem I will read out as to close my talk. Cactus grounding, dense and succulent, year-round thriving, strong and resilient. Protective exterior, sharp little spines, watery warm interior, mother love shines. Marching line of duty, courageous and adaptable, surviving in uncertainty. Nature Unstoppable. And then I'll close my talk with a video, hold on, of the book opening and closing, because it's actually quite fun to hear the book. One sec. That's it. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andre. Next, we're going to hear from David Johnson. David?
I appreciate being in this exhibition. Although I've been in 400 exhibitions, I've probably been rejected from 400 exhibitions. So, you know, an art life is a life of constant humiliation and an occasional reward. I come to book arts from printmaking. About 25, 30 years ago, when I discovered this book art business, I had been making big color woodcuts. And I thought, oh, what's this book stuff? We're making big color prints. We're competing with painting and sculpture. Well, what do we want to go back 500 years for? And then I went to an Antonio Frasconi exhibition at the Grolier Center, and then it was all over for me. So I've been making books for about 25 or 30 years, and originally as a printmaker, who came to prints from drawing, I just wanted to make picture books. I thought, you know, picture books, that's what we start with when we're kids. They give us these cloth picture books so we can't tear them, and they're very light on words because we can't read yet anyway. And I just wanted to make picture books. And so I did. And the thing I like about the accordion book is, for me, an accordion book, you open it up, you put it on the table, it's like a whole exhibition. It's not only a whole exhibition, it's like if you're doing animal prints, it's like the parade of the circus animals when they come to town, walk down the street. What else is an accordion book? It's a Japanese screen. I've been in trouble for the way I make books with different people. You know, everyone has their own idea of what a book is. Some book dealers don't want to deal with me. I don't have enough text. One time I had a man I really appreciate yell at me, telling me, "That's not a book, that's a folio of prints." So I introduced books at the school I taught at. And once we brought in an old beat up letterpress, the kids just went crazy and they all wanted to use it and they all make books. And the thing was, it seemed books and letterpress made the kids feel like they were empowered. It was kind of a wonderful thing. The book I have in the show is a book of animals. Sometimes I wonder why I draw animals. I think there's many reasons. I think we're attracted to animals. Many of us have pets, you know, cats, dogs. When you're driving through the countryside or something, and someone sees a deer, a goat, or a little pig squealing and saying, "Look, look, look." So I think we're attracted to animals. I think Degas claimed he was drawing the human animal. I draw the human animal, and I also draw animals. So therefore, I like to go to the county fair. Oh, we didn't have a county fair for a couple of years. It was a pandemic, but we have started again. So as someone who teaches drawing, or taught drawing, I felt that was part of my job. I should draw so I know what I'm talking about when I try to help the kids learn to draw. So on the fair only lasts a week, but for a week you have countless models. So I would go to Walgreens and I would get the cheapest sketchbook and I would try to fill it. I'm sorry, I'm low tech and I don't have slides. The animals move constantly. Even the pigs, which are usually sleeping, suddenly get up. So you have to make your drawings very quickly. Once upon a time, a fellow teacher told me, "Oh, don't you wish you had a copper sketchbook?" He liked to draw, he liked copper. The sketches I do, I try to draw like a musician plays continuously to try to always be ready and warmed up. But of course, many of my drawings aren't up to snuff, but I can take the best of them and combine them to make a book. Originally, also some of the drawings I do, like the placement isn't so good, some details are good, the overall thing is good, so I can combine elements from the different drawings to make the images more successful. Funny things happen. I'll get excited. Oh, I think this is a book idea. I think I can take all these prints and make a book. So I'll get excited and I'll have like 6 prints and I'll proof it and make a book of it. But then the next thing I know, I go to another concert, I draw more musicians. Oh, I have 10 musicians now. So I make a few books with 10, and then I go back to the concert the next week. I get excited, and I have all these proofs with different numbers of prints. The funny thing about transitioning from big prints to books for me was, the big prints took like a month or so. And sometimes it's so much fun to make a small print because you can do it so quickly. And some of the best prints in the world, were small, like Rembrandt. And the wonderful thing about books then for me was that all of a sudden somebody's taking small prints seriously because there's 20 of them in this book, perhaps. The only thing is, it usually takes a month or more to make the book. Early on, I wanted to make books that were just pictures. I felt like I was a picture guy, but the more I got into it, suddenly I wanted the paper to be presented well, maybe have decals on the bottom. I wanted to bind it as good as I could, which wasn't too good. I wanted the letterpress in there. Sometimes I would make up something I thought was amusing and I would print that. And once I started making books, whereas things can go wrong when you make a print, when you make a book of 10 prints, 10 times the things can go wrong. My friend recently told me, accordion's hardest. That's okay if it's a little skewed. Oh, good, because like 1 out of 10 wasn't skewed. Anyway, what I'd like to finish by saying is that as I've learned more and more about books and more things that can be done with them, what I've really realized is that in terms of schooling myself in the book arts, I think I'm at about the kindergarten level. So thanks for your attention. I hope I've said something of value. I'll sign off.
Thank you so much, David. Now, of course, we'd like to bring up Mary V. Marsh to give her presentation. Mary?
Hi, thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm in Oakland, California, and I'd like to show you a few of my artist books, my progression leading up to the book that's in the show right now. So I'm gonna share screen. Okay, so this is an early artist book I made. Wanted to make a newspaper. As Joe is saying, most of my books are about communication and reading. I worked in libraries for many years. This reflects part of my library duties was to put the newspapers on the sticks in the morning. And then this is News Delivery Systems. This is my first book I made on the letterpress. I do a lot of my printing at Kala Art Institute in Berkeley. So this was on the letterpress, setting lead type, and I wanted to make a timeline because of my kind of frustration and anxiety with the quickly changing technology of communication. So I did these, a series of hand card rubber stamps and handset type, highlighting some of the impactful changes and developments through history, and think about how that innovation altered the ways in which we communicate. Each new medium kind of changes the way we think and changes how it is accessed. And then this is Market to Market, commuter diary. And I did a diary for about a year in which I made notes of my daily commute from Oakland to San Francisco and back, and drawings of people reading. So there's 4 layers, a digital photo layer and 2 letterpress polymer plate layers from my drawings, and then the text layer, which has a bit from the diary entry. And there's 5 vignettes, 1 for each day of the work week. And then this transported is made from the same content, and it's the intaglio letterpress plates, and each book, each copy, it's an open edition, so each copy is unique in that each one has a different combination of folios and hand watercolored. And after the 2016 election, I was inspired to make a tabloid newspaper as the news sound bites became shorter and more shrill. The making of this piece, tabloid, was kind of a process of making sense of the times. I collected articles and headlines that addressed changes in communication, and carved some of the articles with linoleum cut, and then handset type of the headlines to get that tabloid tone of alarm. And then this year I was invited to be a small plates artist and make a book at the San Francisco Center for the Book. So this was all done on the letterpresses there. And it was great working in that studio and having Chad Johnson help me at every step of the way. So it has the, it's a book about hands and how we use them for communication and how some things have changed since the pandemic. And it's the linoleum cuts and polymer text blocks, and then handset type for some of the idiomatic phrases that have the word hands in it. And during the pandemic, my husband, Tony Belliver, and I had opportunity to do some exploration photography outings, and using my father's old cameras, Pentax and a Rolleiflex. We looked out for the cell towers that are disguised as trees. And I've been thinking about how they kind of represent our desire to always be connected and yet have our infrastructure hidden, and how companies are collecting and selling our data. And also when the Kala Studios opened back up, I was able to take a class from Kazuko Watanabe in the photo polymer intaglio technique. And so I started working with all these photos that I had, and from the analog camera source, scanning the photos and making the plates. And then this is the first series I call Foliage, and they are the intaglio hand watercolored, and they're kind of reminiscent of like vintage postcards of famous places you might want to visit. And they're all fake trees. So then that segued into making the book that's in the show, here, metadata mining. And I think of these trees as kind of new icons of our times, silent witnesses to our comings and goings. I used pressure printing for some of the background patterns that show kind of unseen structures, and screenshots of maps and texts exchanged between me and my husband, and thinking about how our personal attention is the new digital currency. And the folios are, I printed it folios, and they're attached to an accordion fold Tyvek spine, a hedichile structure. I wanted there to be space in between the folios to show unseen data and wires inside the holes that I cut. As the pages are turned, you can imagine connecting to one transceiver and another tree as you move down the road. And the last page in the book has a utility pole connecting my house to the power and internet. I like to think about the actual, what do the systems look like which we're communicating? So through some of my reading and research about this subject, I made this poem. Our attention is the product, harvesting authentic behavior, geolocation, metadata at scale, ping. And then here is a colophon, which is a handset type in a tree shape. And shows the back with the foil stamp cover and the back of the spine and the Tyvek slip cover. And then just last week, I was able to do a residency at In Cahoots in Petaluma, and I moved through a whole new group of these single prints in the Here Here series, adding new polymer plate and pressure printing prints. So that was a wonderful week of really experimenting with some of the layers. And that's it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. Our final artist this evening is Dan Wood. Dan?
Well, thank you, Joe, and thanks to all the other panelists. It's really interesting to see everybody's work. Mary, what a coincidence for me to be following you, because I also have been working with a news delivery device. The book that I have in the show is called The Linotype Daily, and it's a collection of prints that were created on a linotype machine, which I will show you in a minute, which I am sitting right here in front of. It's like those masterpiece theaters where the person's sitting with like the roaring fire. But for me, it's a roaring, bubbling, well, it's not bubbling, but there's a big crucible of molten lead on a linotype machine. Okay, so I'm a printer and artist. I teach letterpress printing part-time as well. And in that time, starting about, I guess, March of 2019, so it was pre-pandemic, I've had this, I run a commercial letterpress print shop, and I actually have two linotype machines. I have a Ludlow machine. There's like a view of too many presses to name right in front of me. But basically, I've always wanted to try to I have these cast metal type and a linotype machine in my work before, but I was sort of looking for a way to really incorporate this technology into my art making. So I'll describe a little bit about the machine. I'll show some images of the book, and then can demonstrate what the machine is. So basically, a linotype machine is a type casting machine. So it's not a printing press. And it was invented in the 1880s, and basically in the end of the 19th century, middle to the end of the 19th century, letterpress printing, which was commercial printing, everything had got so fast, big steam presses, newspaper presses, the actual printing of things was technologically getting faster and faster and faster. And the one sort of spot where things were still slowed down, that you just could not do it any faster, no matter how many people you had, was hand typesetting, because every single book, every single, oops, I forgot to set a timer, which I absolutely need to do, every single newspaper, everything, someone would be setting all of that type, all those paragraphs, every single page, every single signature by hand. So there was a big sort of push and race technologically to try to figure out some way of doing this insanely complicated thing automatically. So the linotype machine was the machine that actually succeeded in that. There was a lot of other machines. There's a monotype machine, which came later. It's a little bit different. Since it casts type automatically, but it's still casting individual pieces of type. Ludlow machine casts lines of type, but it's actually, you're still hand setting the headlines. That's what it was used for. There's a machine called the page typesetter, which is what Mark Twain had put his life savings in as an investment, which did not work, which was one of the reasons he went around the country talking so much, because he had lost all his money in a competitor to the Linotype. The Linotype was invented by a German immigrant watchmaker, Ottmar Mergenthaler in Baltimore. And what's crazy about it is, oh sure, I'll just show them really quick. Okay, is as soon as you type a key, up here is a magazine full of type matrices. So it's not actual type, it's the reverse casting of type. So this is a capital G, which I don't know if you'll be able to see or not. If I was to keep typing, it would be Georgia. I would say, okay, that line's good. I go to cast, it comes over here. There's a pot of molten lead in the back, a plunger goes down, pushes the molten lead to the front of the machine, which you want to make sure everything's working well, because if it's not, you get something called a squirt, where all the hot molten metal is shooting right at you. Then instantly hits the mold, cools down, and then whatever you've typed, in this case it says testing, right, is cast in a slug at whatever point size you've told the machine to cast it at. You can immediately take that slug, send it into a column, do whatever you're going to want to do with it, set your type, 2 minutes after casting it, put it on one of the printing presses, and then you're printing right away. So this is the thing that sped up the printing process to such a degree. It really is like the next revolution after Gutenberg, where suddenly, a city or a town, instead of having 1 or 2 newspapers, could have 4 or 5 newspapers. You have a lot of different viewpoints that could then be heard by the public. You could have 20 and 30-page newspapers as opposed to 4-page newspapers, because you're not having to hand set the whole thing, print it, and then put all that type away before you can set the next day's edition. So in the time that we are living in this age where there's just so much information, Twitter, social media, radio, TV, everything, that I sort of look at the Linotype machine as the beginning of this sort of step into a truly mass information age. And so, happening to have 2 Linotype machines in my shop, I set out this project starting in March of 2019, where I was like, okay, what if I use the Linotype and I make a new print every single day? And the idea would be, you're using the technology that sort of started us in on this overwhelming period of news and information, and maybe by using this process that once was considered so breathtakingly fast, maybe taking the time in this process, which is now very, 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 very slow compared to putting out a tweet, maybe be able to come some sort of insight into how we deal with the information of our world. So what I'm going to do very quickly is share my screen, this green button, and I guess here, share. Okay, so this is the actual Linotype Daily box set. So what I did was for 366 days, it was a leap year. I basically would commit myself to, before midnight, I will, write, conceive of, write, cast the type, layout, and then print, addition of 100 or 150 prints, because these are automatic presses, and then take a picture of it and upload it to the internet every single day. So I had subscribers who would get actual paper copies. Some of the paper copies might go into a show, it might go on window in downtown Providence, who knows what, but that was the goal. And so this is the box opened up. And then after this year, I'll talk about the process a little bit more, but at the end of the year, I now have 366 prints that I want to put together in a way that's accessible to people. And so went through various options in terms of accordion folds or how else to put it together. And ended up in this sort of more archival file format with custom little die cut file folders for the box. So this is the box that's in Georgia. That one's not supposed to be there. Hey, you're all on the wrong prints. That's okay, I don't care. Wonder what happened. Either way, these are some of the prints that I've done, after that period. So generally speaking, you would have a headline. In this case, it's cast in 48 point or 72 point umbra on the Ludlow. And then I would have whatever the news stories that I was actually sort of trying to decipher. These are prints from the actual year. Sometimes it would be quotes that seemed appropriate to that particular moment, whatever it might be. Let me see what other things we have here. Oh, okay. Whoops. Oh yeah, I think it all got mixed up. That's okay. I'm gonna close this and share screen. Oops. And we'll go to desktop. Okay, very quickly, as I show you the chaos of my life over here, I'm just going to show a few prints from the actual book. Oh yeah, okay, so we'll very quickly. These are some of the prints that are in the actual book. So it could be anything from an actual headline about something, shootings that are happening in Texas, breaking news. I was waiting to go to my daughter's high school. It's just a couple blocks from here in Providence. And so, you're waiting to find out what the actual vote is, and you're going to actually get there and then finally get the thing and be able to take a picture, cast it, put it on the press, get it printed, take a picture, get it on Instagram, and then run home. So my daughter and I, we were eating at close to 11 o'clock or midnight for many, many nights over that year. This was some of the kinds of things that could go from very political of the moment issues to, just what was happening, that day. In this case, it was teenage whistleblower alleges her dad ate the peanut butter. A local teenager whose Thursday morning routine consisted of studying for an AP physics midterm, making breakfast and lunch, and preparing for the day, made time to repeatedly point out that her dad had eaten all of the peanut butter the night before, thus making her morning tasks much more difficult. The whistleblower, who has noticed similar excess peanut butter eating habits by her friend Betty, wishes to remain anonymous. Her dad, who admits he has been eating a lot of peanut butter but claims the snack was perfect and he has done nothing wrong, would like her to testify. So these are the kind of mix of things that would be covered. Then sometimes it would be more pressing news about Lord Voldemort taking over the White House, or at least the equivalent of a Lord Voldemort, and then tide charts taking into account the 2 to 6 foot sea level rise for the next 60 to 80 years, etc. So, oops, where did that come from? These are some of the more recent prints. I've continued doing it now. Instead of the Linotype daily, it's the Linotype occasionally. And so I'm not necessarily waiting. It's a little bit stranger when you're doing it every day. You're sort of, as an artist, all of us need deadlines, or at least I do, to get something done. And I found that once I knew I had to make a print every single day, there's no longer a question as to the fact, is this something I want to make? Is this interesting enough? Blah, 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 blah. You're just gonna do it. And so as a result, the things that you end up producing are, you're going from a place of total panic at 6 o'clock. It's the end of the workday. You really want to eat dinner before 10. You only have 2 or 3 hours. It's going to take 2 to 3 hours to print this thing. And so you're picking a story, you're picking a typeface, you're doing all this stuff together. And then suddenly 3 or 4 hours later, you've got this thing and you're like, whoa, I'm so glad I did this. Since I stopped doing it every day, it's now called the Linotype occasionally. And so that's what some of these are, which will be maybe once a week, maybe 3 or 4 times a month. I think it's like on average 2 to 6 times a month. I would actually do this. Sometimes it's things that I'm reading. Sometimes it's things that you just sort of come across. This is the part of the whole year as a wall piece. Sometimes it's quotes that were meaningful me when I happened to see it on the newspaper that morning. And you're like, you know what? I think that's something that should go on a print. Okay, now let me just see if I can actually stop this share. And I think we are getting, there we go. Yep, getting close to the time, but 10 minutes. So very quickly though, this is a line type machine. I'll really quickly go through it. What I'm doing here is every time I tap on a T, it's dropping the letters. Right here it says Georgia. And I'm not going to do the whole sentence of the book, but CNTR, or we'll just go with book. Now what's going to happen is as soon as I go to cast, right? I'm going to cast right here. As soon as I go to cast, I can start typing the next line. So, this is how every newspaper, most text-based work was being printed throughout the 20th century until the late 1970s. If I go to cast, plunger goes down. Now pushing the lead into the mold. And then what's crazy is out pops the slug. But in a second, that sound right there are all of the type that I just passed, right? Automatically dropping down into their own special slot. So it's not only setting your type, casting your type, it's also putting all of your type away. So it's a just completely insane machine. And then this plug, right, which says Georgia CNR for book, sorry, would then get locked up into this chase and then put on a printing press, and then 5 minutes later you're out printing hundreds and hundreds of these copies. So that's what I've been doing from March 1st, 2019. Keep myself out of trouble. And I will hand it back to you, Joe, and to everybody else for questions.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was fascinating to see that process and to see that slug made so fast as well.
Very weird.
Excellent. Well, once again, just as a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those into the chat or do use the Q&A feature. Just really quickly, to follow up with Dan and Mary, since your works are both letterpress, linotype based, but so based in the news and media. What's that like working for you? And Mary, I do have to admit, we no longer have it in the library, but I do remember the giant sticks for the newspaper, and I kind of greatly miss those things because we just sort of keep them in drawers now. And I think there's something missing in a building with not having those sticks with the draping papers on them for people to see.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're, now as going back to that too, as we sort of move out of a printing paper, newspaper, daily culture to where people just get on electronic sources, how do we, you look at cell towers and things like that, but even going back and just finding a newspaper and saying, and with inspiration from that.
Yeah, I'm really a paper ink on person. I love a lot of the new tools we have, and of course we have Zoom, which has been great. But I just really like the pace. I think reading a physical thing that you're holding is very different than reading digital material. I think we've made a big difference in our culture and we will see the results in years to come. So I appreciate what Dan was sharing, like what does it mean to do this laborious linotype process every day, as opposed to sharing it on Instagram. Like, I think it's a great project to just see what does that mean? What is the difference?
But I'll say one of the things where I kind of am traveling in both of those worlds, because one of the things that's so weird for me is like, I agree, I think everybody here, you know, you like taking the drawing tool and putting it on the pencil, right? Or on the paper to make your mark, if you're printing, to do all these things. But what's also interesting is, so for me, I know I'm printing, you know, let's say 150 of these. Right now it's once a week, you know, a couple times a week, but it was every day. And, you know, I appreciate, you know, seeing this physical thing, passing these things out to people. If I run into them on the street, et cetera, I feel like there's just like putting this information onto a piece of paper, like those newspaper racks. It's really kind of it has a certain integrity to it, even though it's still used for bad things like starting the Spanish-American War. But the other thing that's strange is looking at everyone's work. You know, tonight just seeing the sort of images is that when I would do this, then I would take a picture on the machine and then put it on the internet. And what's really crazy is I feel like even seeing something that was made by hand on, you know, I know that most of the people are going to experience this by seeing it on their phone or their computer, right? And so it's a really strange thing, but because it's still carrying that handmade energy and machine-made energy, but this physicality of it onto this dinky little phone screen, it's still somehow, it's like you're talking about trying to capture people's attention. It holds people's attention more. So it's pulling into that same currency of attention, but it forces you to sort of experience things in a different way. So to me, it was a really interesting, it's really interesting sort of having feet in both of those worlds, because it's handmade, people are going to pay attention to it differently than if it's just a meme that says something, which is really strange. But I don't know what it was like for you. It was really fun seeing the newspaper prints with I know with the linoleum, how much work that is to actually hand set all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of like an insane project.
Yeah. Well, it was about slowing down.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let's do this really slowly. I mean, you know, all of us make these things that are kind of laborious, and people probably wonder why, you know, why spend all that time? But we know why.
Well, you know, speaking of doing labor-intensive things, you know, and slowing down, it almost is like a meditative process. You know, like Andre with you and the embroidery, and you know, Daniel with you and the, you know, the drawing in your book, even though it's not a copper sketchbook, but you know, how do those things, almost the meditative process, play into your process, and does it lead you to discover things that maybe you didn't intend when you started out working on a particular piece? Andre?
Yeah, I mean, I think because a lot of my work is so physical, and doing that embroidery, I think sometimes after I complete it, like sometimes I do a certain stitch and then I don't like how it looks, and then I just decide to like just cut it all up and restart. And somehow sometimes the mistakes turn into the actual piece. Like I actually like the latest cyanotype embroidery that I did. I had just done a straight like brick stitch that I didn't like, and then I just sort of cut it up, but then I kind of like the messy look of it. And so yeah, it evolves. I think a lot of my work is involved with the process of things, because I would have one vision of making it, but then as I make it, I move on to a different process. Yeah, and it's can't be done until you actually do it. You don't know what's going to happen until you do it.
Yeah, you have to just make it.
Yeah, it can't be conceptual. You just have to do it.
David, what about you?
Regarding holding things in your hands, my wife listens to books on tape, and I read paper books. And if I listen to books on tape, you know, I space out when I read, and I have to go back and read a paragraph again. Or if there's a really good sentence, I go back and I read it again. How do you do that with a book on tape? However, I do feel like all this stuff I'm making is mostly seen on an internet screen, like Dan said.
Mm-hmm.
I still do it. Another thing I want to say was when I first got into this book stuff, I felt like, artist book, what's that? I thought it was a handmade book, and I admire those, I forget what you call books before the 15th century, in Canabula, right? I admire that stuff. And it's like, you can hardly believe it's handmade. It's so fabulous, and I'm so primitive. But at the same time, I think it looks like today, an artist book, people want it to look like a trade book. They want it to be so perfect. And they're using all these other ways to make it, which is fine. When I first started setting type, I read about it, and I think that graphic designers rediscovered wood type because all their computer stuff seemed so cold to them. And the wood type, it had dents, and it was just such beautiful stuff. I think that's where the renewal of typesetting came, like in the 80s or whenever it was. And I was told that graphic design teachers wanted kids to set type, because when you set type by hand, space is an actual physical thing, and you know more about type. So although I never took a graphic design course myself, I would tell the students that therefore, according to graphic design teachers,
I think we may have lost David there for a second.
That's a good place to freeze, though, I have to say.
That was a good place to read. Maybe he'll come back. Well, why don't we have a question in the Q&A that we could ask, and we'll go around as we sort of like wrap up here. And if David unfreezes, we'll ask him as well. But the question is, for centuries, art has reflected the cultural, political, and social concerns of its time. Today's world presents many areas of concern. Is it important for artists to engage in these arenas? Are there messages to express or challenges that you want to address in your future works? Why don't we start with Andre?
Yes. So yeah, of course, I think it is very important to address the things that's happening. I think because it affects us as a community, as society, and especially like, I think the environment affects me as an artist. And so I have to express that. And I think making art for me is making connections with others. And I definitely want to have a clear message going out. And so for my future work that I'm working on currently is a collaborative project, because I've been so isolated in a while for the last 2 years. And I wanted to actually make connections with my Korean American artists collective. And so I have started a project called Roots of Korean Diaspora, and making connections that way, kind of exploring our thoughts about how every artist's interpretation of what our roots are, how we want to go from there, from how we have experienced being in America, being displaced, and sort of making that message. And I'm going to collaborate and make an artist book using all these facilities, and hopefully communicate and reach others. So that's my current project at the moment.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Mary, what about you?
Well, I think it's ultimately up to the artist. I think the personal is political, and you can just talk about your environment and your life, and that is a cultural statement as well. I am a little bit maybe political in my work, but I do tie it into my personal experience and kind of how I'm responding to the world, or my frustration with the world. And it's important to me to share my ideas, and I like it when my art can go out and travel to other places. I've never been to Georgia, but my book has. So, and the kind of the exchange with others is really valuable. I mean, I think artists have a lot to say to the world.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. Oh, and David's back. So, well, David, let me go ahead and I'll ask the question again real quick for you, and then maybe if Dan pops back up. So the question was about art being reflected in cultural, political, and social concerns of its time. Today's world presents many areas of concern. Is it important for artists to engage in these arenas? Are there messages to express or challenges that you want to address in
These, like when I first started art school, visiting artists would talk about painting and stuff. And now it's like all the artists are investigative reporters, you know. But I grew up in the 60s, so, social criticism was part of it. And then when I look back, like who's the best artist? It's Peter Bruegel, right? So I think, I hope that answers your question somehow.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Dan, what about you?
Yes, sorry about the muting myself. No, I would just, I agree. I feel like as an artist in society, I'm a person who's wants to be, is just by nature involved with the world around me. And so if you're an artist, you're going to be taking all this information in. It doesn't mean that you need to be, there's some political art that's really, really painfully boring, right? And I feel like it's just really up to the artist to do the thing that drives them and can sort of engage them with the world. I mean, I do feel like, shoot, what was I going to say? I think I had a thought when I muted myself, but I don't remember. But I think that, people, we all seem to be somewhat on the same page. And I feel like Bruegel is a great example where, there's some really amazing paintings which have a lot of not necessarily social criticism, but painting the world as it is in all its sort of complexity is really part of our job. So I think I feel lucky to be a part of this.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. And speaking of very lucky, I think we've all been very lucky to have this conversation with you all this evening and enjoy seeing the implements that you work on and how they function, and hearing a little more about your art. Once again, if you all would like to see Book as Art Transformation on the 4th floor gallery at the Decatur Library, don't forget that you can sign up to come visit that exhibition Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and our special viewing on October 31st for our White Glove Day. Once again, thank you all so very, very much for joining us. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, David, Mary, and Dan. It was a wonderful conversation, and thank you all who stayed with us this evening and allowed us to come into your homes to share art and a little bit of our stories with you. Thank you all again so very, very much, and we will see you again very soon. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.